I'm Parker Briggs, and I'm at Fort Steilacoom Park, and it's late summer, almost fall. And today I'm going to show you some native plants you'd find around western Washington and specifically the South Puget Sound. And I'm going to tell you how to identify them and what you can do with them and anything else that comes up on my mind when I point at the plants and show them to you. So let's get started. Follow me. This here is a Garry oak, also known as an Oregon white oak, found from southern British Columbia all the way to northern California, and found especially common in the Willamette Valley in Oregon. But here we are in the South Puget Sound, and traditionally, historically, this region consisted of a lot of prairie. It was prairie, oak, savanna, and it was savanna mixed in with lots of oaks. And it was this kind of oak, Garry white oak, Quercus garryana, that's the Latin name. The genus is Quercus, and the specific name is garryana. And it has very rounded leaves. Here, I'll find a leaf. These leaves are very rounded. This is about the only oak we have right here, but farther east there are a lot of different species of oak, and not all of them are rounded. The rounded ones typically have sweeter acorns, so you can eat the acorns. They're not very good, but you can turn them into a flour if you dry them, roast them, and I've never done it. You can. And very brittle wood, and they take a long time to grow. So these trees here, they're not huge, but they're probably, this stand is 100, 200 years old. So they take a long time to grow, and there aren't that many as there used to be, because the prairie land, which was traditionally what this region was, a lot of it has been overtaken by Douglas firs, another tree, which I'll tell you more about as we move along. So let's keep moving. Here we see one of the many dry watering holes found along the lower Serengeti. Unfortunately, there are no rhinoceroses today. So these trees up here that we're coming on, these are Douglas firs. Pseudotsuga, that's the genus name. That means false, pseudo, and then Suda, which is the genus name for hemlock. So that means that the Latin name means false hemlock, and really it's not a hemlock, that's why it's false hemlock, but it's also not a true fir. So it's in kind of a category of its own, false hemlock, but it's called Douglas fir, and people just call it fir, so that's what I'm going to call it. And these trees have taken over a lot of the prairie land, the ecosystems found south of Puget Sound, and so you can see that they're growing kind of really, look over there, they're growing into the prairie. So it's moving this way, this stand of Douglas fir, into the oaks, and it's taking over this stand of oak, which probably has been here for hundreds of years, but the Douglas firs grow quite quickly. They grow very tall and very fast, and so they're very, very good when fire is suppressed in forest lands and the prairie ecosystems, that they take over oaks very quickly, and so they're doing quite well. And I'll show you the needles up close when we get closer. So these needles, you can see, if you crush them, they smell fruity. You'd think they'd smell like a Christmas tree, but really they smell pretty fruity. And they're usually dark green, about maybe an inch long. And on the bottom there are two little white lines. So that's one way that you can identify this Douglas fir. There are two little white lines that run along the length of it, and they're separated by a small green vein in the middle. And this tree is easy to identify in contrast to other needled trees, coniferous trees in the region, because the needles grow all around the branch. The little twigs, they grow surrounding the twigs 360 degrees, and it kind of looks like a bottle brush, you know, that sort of style. It grows, and they cover the twigs all the way around and kind of droop. So if you're looking at it from a distance, you can usually tell what it is. So here's a good view of what the prairie would look like, a prairie ecosystem. And you can see it's dominated by the trees, the Gary oak. And if you look to the left, this is pretty standard new growth Douglas fir forest. And that's what we're gonna go in today. So up here, on the right and the left, is, what's this called? Oregon grape. It looks like holly. You know, you saw it, you'd think it's holly. So you can take a close look at the leaves. Because it's growing in the sun, these leaves are especially withered, and they look even more like holly because they're kind of withered up. But in the forest, when they're more shade, they look kind of like this. They're flatter, but still very pointy, and some of them even get yellow, red, turn different colors. And this stand is kind of unusual in that it's so tall, maybe 8 feet tall at its tallest point up there. But most of them don't get this tall, and they're different varieties, but they all produce little blue berries. It kind of looks like, they kind of look like grapes, that's why they're called grapes, but they're little berries, and they're none here, maybe we'll see some later, but they come in bunches. They look a lot like grapes, and sometimes they're used to flavor wine, but they are extremely tart. They're not gonna hurt you, they're not toxic, they're not that good. They're not that good unless you want to play a trick on a friend. Here's an example of Oregon grapes, little blueberries, but they are extremely withered now. So they've been out in the sun. Ugh. But they're usually pretty plump and pretty smooth. And here's St. John's wort. Pretty late in the season now, you can come up close. And so all you can see are the flowers. But the leaves, when it has leaves, it's very easy to identify because you break one off, you hold it up to the sun, and there are little dots all along the bottom of the leaf, and the light shines through. So it's very easy to identify like that. These don't have leaves now. And one use that people use it for is for depression, anxiety, for like naturopath, hippie medicine. That's something that people use a lot for depression or nervous system issues. Okay, gonna edit this in here. So it was brought to my attention that I called it hippie medicine. So I shouldn't have said hippie, even though I think many hippies probably do use it. One thing I should say is that this is the medicinal version of St. John's wort. What a lot of people know as St. John's wort is a very aggressive trailing variety that has bigger leaves, bigger flowers, and grows maybe just a couple feet high, and you know, can cover a hill or a flat area very quickly. But that is not what's used for medicinal purposes because it does not have the same levels of compounds present in the plant that this species does. Okay, plant here. This is Indian plum, or osoberry, called Indian plum because the little berries look like plums. And it's one of the very first plants in the season, in the spring, to bloom. Birds love it, so it has hundreds, maybe thousands of berries on one plant, but by the end of the summer, they're pretty much all gone. You don't see many hanging down and dried on the plant because the birds just love them. And those that you do find hanging down off the plant are probably filled with maggots. So if it's past maybe sometime in mid-July, I would not touch them. Early in the season though, they're some of the best. Once they turn dark purple, they're very good. Not particularly sweet, but very flavorful. And it may be an acquired taste, but they're pretty good. The flowers that show up hang down kind of like little bundles of horns. They're shaped like little horns, and they smell like cat. That's what they smell like. But hummingbirds love it. Anna's hummingbirds, they come down, they love them. Nothing better than cat for attracting Anna's hummingbirds. Okay, plant number 2 here. This is snowberry. Show you some of the berries. They're white. These are pretty small, but they can get up to maybe an inch in diameter. Poisonous. Don't eat them. Very small, round leaves, and it's a very aggressive plant. It can make a very thick thicket of plants and grow very thickly. And some of the leaves are triangle shaped or even wavy a little bit, but they're all very round, and so it's easy to identify. The berries, snowberries, white because called snowberry because of the color, they last through most of the summer and even into the winter. I'm here in the Australian outback, and there's an elephant out in the bush over there. I think it saw me and it's about to charge. Ah, crocodile! One word, yarrow. This plant, yarrow, it's used for lots of things. It grows all over, and it gets big, but it can be small. It's easy to identify. Little lacy leaves. See, it is very similar, looks very similar to poison hemlock. Don't get them confused if you're going to eat this. But you can use the leaves, stem, and flowers for treating a fever. It's good for treating a fever. You can make you sweat, you break a fever. But come a little closer and you can see the flowers. This is late summer, so they're pretty withered, but they grow very bright white and flat topped. So see, come take a look here. The red, kind of a red stem, that is not always found on yarrow, but it is always found on poison hemlock. So if it has a red stem, and stay close, and the flowers, see how they come out from a number of different forks on the stem. If they all come from one fork, if it looks like that, then it is probably Queen Anne's lace or hemlock, and so don't use it for that then. That's all I have to say about yarrow, but it's a big one, so don't forget it. This young tree right here is big leaf maple. It has, it's very young, and so the leaves are not big, but once it gets bigger, it can be one of the biggest, it's the biggest maple in the Northwest, and it has leaves that can be up to a foot wide. And, oh yeah, it can have more mosses and ferns and lichens growing on it than any other tree in the Northwest, so that's why it's called the hospitality tree, because it has so many different plants and animals that love to live in it. And it does have sweet sap, but not as sweet as a sugar maple, meaning it takes about 100 gallons of big leaf maple sap to make 1 gallon of big leaf maple syrup. So it's not very effective, and I wouldn't do it. This is Queen Anne's lace. I just mentioned it a few minutes ago. You can see up close how all the flowers stem from one little fork in the stem, and it's green and flat topped. So that's Queen Anne's lace as opposed to yarrow. Okay, this plant right here is ocean spray. It's called ocean spray because the little flowers look like mist when they're white. Too late now, they're brown and ugly, but don't eat it. It's not edible, nothing to eat, and it's called Holodiscus discolor in Latin, nothing more. This is big leaf maple. Another example of big leaf maple, and you can see moss starting to grow on its branches and trunk. But usually it's found farther in the woods and in the shade because it doesn't grow as tall as Douglas firs. And so it's usually shaded out, and so there's a lot more moss and greener moss growing on it than there is here. Okay, this is hazelnut, beaked hazelnut, something cornutta. You can eat them. I've never tried them, but you can. Brackern ferns, back here. Maybe there's some more, yeah, up here. Unlike most other ferns you'll find, these come from one stem. So they all come from one stem that shoots up in the spring, and then there are different fronds that shoot out from that one stem, and they turn kind of orange yellow in the late summer. And when they're young, you can eat them. You can fry them, fry up the little spooled up heads. So it was some president's favorite food, can't remember who. And here you can see native blackberry. 3 leaves, and very, very common. You'll find it pretty much anywhere you walk in the woods here. It has 3 leaves and all very pointy. Usually you'd want to avoid 3-leafed plants because you have poison oak, poison ivy, poison hemlock. They all have 3 leaves, but you don't find those very often here. And 99.9% of the time you find a 3-leaved plant here. It's probably going to be this native blackberry. It's called Rubus ursinus Pacific blackberry, I think. And they're good. They're better for some things than the other kind, the Himalayan blackberry, which have 5 leaves. And they're easier to pick because they don't have big spines, but they grow in vines and grow along the ground. And they're pretty small, but they don't have big seeds. They're pretty oblong, really. But this is one of the most common plants you'll find in the woods, so remember it. Okay, so for lunch I worked with hot peppers, and I forgot that I did that, and I just rubbed my eye. So I'm not going to open this eye for the rest of the video. Don't worry about me, I'm fine. Moving on, this plant right here is called false Solomon's seal. It has, it usually grows on the ground, and it's one long vine, you know, maybe a foot-long vine. And at the very end, there's a bunch of white berries that you can eat. They are edible. I've never had them. Okay, this is some rose. I don't like roses, so I'm not going to say anything about it. This is sword fern. Don't know the Latin name. I don't really know what you can do with it, but it's very common, so you should know it. It has usually quite a few fronds that stick out from the same big, thick base in the bottom, and they look like swords. Go figure. I don't know what that is. This is Salal here. It has very thick, leathery leaves, very thick and leathery leaves. Usually pretty round. That's not very round, but they can be very, very, very round. And they have black berries, maybe dark blue, but I think they're black berries. Big, round. Oh, they're good. They're good. You want to make jam. They're very soft. Usually when you pick them, they mush. So there's not much you can do with them but make jam. Okay, this plant is red huckleberry, one of the most common huckleberries you'll find. It's Vaccinium parvifolium in Latin. And, little red berries, none on the plant right now, but they're very tart and they're very small, and I think they're good. They're almost translucent because they don't have much stuff in them. It's a very high liquid content, but I think they're good. And it's a very delicate looking plant, maybe you can see, and it's often found growing out of old stumps or nurse logs. So another plant is English ivy. very common in urban areas. It's very aggressive and invasive, but you'll find it everywhere. And it grows up trees, like right there, and surrounds the trees, can choke them out, strangle them, and kill them. And it's very good at that. I gotta hand it to that English ivy. Right here, this is thimbleberry. Called thimbleberry because the berries look like little thimbles. Too late now, that one's moldy. They're kind of like raspberries, but big crunchy seeds and kind of sour. They're pretty good. The leaves are pretty soft. You can use it as toilet paper. I've never done it. And the leaves can also be turned into a tea and poured on burns and used for stomach problems. But it's pretty common. You'll find it.
Okay, so someone gave me an anonymous tip that in my video I was not being engaging enough. So from now on, I'm going to be very, very engaging.
I have a surprise for you. I have a surprise for you. Take a look here and you'll see thimbleberry. You can use the leaves as toilet paper, but don't use that leaf. It has a daddy long leg. You can eat the berries. They're perfectly edible. Bright red when they're in season, or they'll look moldy and dark and mushy like this one. Not much else to talk about it. Oh yeah, the leaves. You can turn them into a tea. Or use them for a wound, for a burn. Pour the tea on the burn, but not too hot. Not too hot or you'll burn your burn. So you can cool it down. Make it nice and cool. And pour that nice cool liquid on your burn. That's nice burn juice. Have a holly jolly Christmas. Holly right here. That's invasive. I think it's English holly, and it has little bright berries that cover the plant. Depending if it's male or female, I didn't ask how this one identifies. But don't eat the hollyberry. It's toxic. Your friend laurel. It's used in hedges all over the world. It's not native, but it has very good coverage. So if you need privacy from from peeping neighbors, use laurel. And it has berries right here, but they're toxic, so don't eat them. This is education. By the way, don't forget to download my Western Washington native plant expert list. It's in JPEG format and PDF. Just click the link below. Okay, I'm not winking at you. I just rubbed my other eye with my pepper hand, and I am in pain. Speaking of pain, take a look at this beautiful red huckleberry. I found one, even though it's pretty late in summer, this plant has a few little huckleberries left. And perfectly edible. Pretty tart, but pretty good. I used to have a friend. He was about 6 feet tall. He made fun of me for being short. Well, take a look at this tree, Fred. 200 frickin' feet. How does that make you feel? Tall? Yeah, I don't think so. Hi. Right here we have vanilla leaf. It's called vanilla leaf because when it's picked and hung up to dry, it makes the whole house smell like Mom's sweet Mexican vanilla. That's good. And it keeps mosquitoes away. That's even better. This is a rose hip. It's a bald hip rose. And it's not terribly common, but it almost looks like a chili pepper and kind of like the one that I got in my eye. And has round little leaves. And it always has pairs of two and then one at the end. That's how you know what a rose looks like. Don't eat these. You can eat the outer red shell, but avoid eating the the seeds inside, covered in mush, because they have little prickly hairs surrounding each seed. That's why the Indians called this plant Itchy Bottom. Think about that. Hey, you! Come a little closer. How are you feeling? No, not you. You! Y-E-W. Pacific yew. Once endangered due to over-harvesting, due to its anti-carcinogenic properties, it's now recovering. And though a very slow-growing tree in the Pacific Northwest, it's rebounding quite substantially, and so you can see it more and more often as you walk through the woods around here. Oh, hi! I didn't see you there. Welcome to Parker's Patch of the Woods. Hey, in case you need a reminder, don't forget to download my Western Washington expert plant list, native expert plant list. It's in the link. Click it and download. Thank you for your service. These two lovely little are oak galls from a Garry oak, Quercus garryana. Talked about it earlier in this video. Many people mix them with some metal oxide to make ink, some sort of rust, and that was a traditional way to make ink for a long time. Let's keep moving. I think this one's a phallus. This here is English hawthorn. You can take a look at the leaves. They're very distinctive. They almost look like an oak, but they're more they're more pointed on the sides, and little red berries. All parts of this plant, the leaves, flowers in the spring, and berries are very good for heart disease. Not creating it, but preventing it. You can turn it into a tea, or you can grind them up and take them like a pill. This plant right here is Pacific madrona. Unlike most leafed trees, this does not lose its leaves in the fall. It loses its bark. The bark peels off and falls to the ground, and it can be used for teas for certain problems or reasons that I am not aware of. Thank you for joining me today in identifying native plants found in the South Sound region of Washington and the greater Pacific Northwest. If you enjoyed this video, then download the Western Washington Native Plant Expert List in the link below. I'm Parker Briggs, and keep on truckin'.